Director of Integrated Marketing at Coca-Cola. He is, in this role, his primary focus is on point-of-sale shopper messaging and building customer service programs with a heavy emphasis on digital. Prior to Coke, he spent 20 years on the agency side of the business, and he worked for clients such as Eastman Kodak, Saturn, Nokia, Sprint, First Union, and Hewlett-Packard. He's also worked on Ancestry.com, which is kind of topical. He also has worked at the agencies of Hal Riney and Anderson and Limvick in San Francisco and Ogilvy and Mather in New York. He graduated from the University of Kansas. Welcome to the stage, Anders.
Thank you. How about that for some Coca-Cola heartstrings? Thank you guys so much for having me. I am extraordinarily excited to be back in San Francisco, coming back home again. I can call this home. And as any rookie who comes to San Francisco, of course, I forgot to bring a jacket. Knowing how cold it is here, I should have known better after 20 years in this town. The Arctic Home thing was the biggest holiday effort ever by the Coca-Cola Company. And the idea was to develop what we call a galvanizing act to raise awareness of the polar bear and generate funding for its protection. When we talk about galvanizing act, I always have a little bit of a tough time understanding some of these words, but basically it meant we wanted a lot of people to participate rather than have Coke just write a check to the World Wildlife Fund. And so we thought, well, how can we do that? Well, we gave a lot of support behind this. We did public relations, we did print advertising, we did digital, we did mobile, we did the whole thing. I did almost none of that, right? That was my coworker and my colleague Pete Calero, but he couldn't be here. So I'm taking some credit for it, and I really didn't do much on this part. I'm gonna talk to you a little bit at the back end of what I did, what I was involved in, which was primarily kind of in the social, retail, and the digital part. But again, I'm merely here as, I think, more or less of a spokesperson. I am going to talk about some of the cool stuff we did and some of the cool stuff I was involved in. The whole thing started, and this will be a real surprise to you guys, started with a website. And in that website, we gave everybody the opportunity to donate, but also to learn about the Arctic. The idea of Arctic Home was to learn about the polar bear's plights, to learn what you can do and how you can contribute, and to be, for Coca-Cola, to be a good corporate citizen, which we have a pretty good record of being. So, let me see if I can get this thing to work. There we go. So we built this Arctic, this 3D Arctic environment, which was sort of a CAD/CAM virtual environment where you could learn all sorts of things. You could report what was going on in the Arctic, what the scientists were doing, where the bears were. There was all sorts of stuff that you could do that. You could get content, you could get films downloaded, you could get the film you just saw, and you could learn a little bit about each individual bear. We also added a bear tracker where we tracked a few of the bears, and you could see the enormous effort they go through just to feed their kids, or their cubs, I guess you call them, or to get away from predators. And sadly, the biggest predator for polar bear cubs are polar bear fathers. And you could also see where they went, how far they went, and we put tracking devices on them. The other thing that you get was a live video feed from the WWF's scientists who were up there, and they were talking to us, letting us know what was going on at all times. We had visitors from Coco up there. We had visitors from all sorts of scientific expeditions to go up there and visit, and you could follow it. that is, in essence, what the site was about. It's a very, very brief description, but I have 20 minutes, and I have no intention of leaving any time for Q&A. But we also obviously put a big effort behind spreading the word. I'm not going to talk about advertising, print, radio, or any of that, because that's not the forum for this, but we did do some pretty cool stuff, I think, digitally. One of them was we started out with the New York Times, which is where we launched this. So let's think about this whole idea that we talk about, a galvanizing act. What do you do with a galvanizing act? You put your thumbprint on it. So all of a sudden we said, why don't we put little thumbprints on the home page of the New York Times, and those thumbprints will start building, asking you to do your part to where finally the polar bear shows up. And at this point, you click on it. We did the same thing with digital banners. It started building, and at the end of all of this, the texting component of this campaign was huge. We asked people to just text the code in, automatically donate $1, Coke matches it. We had nothing about buying Coca-Cola. We had nothing about, you know, oh, here's your polar bear deal on a 12-pack. It was all about driving donations. Let's see if I can get this down. The Huffington Post, we did sort of a cool thing. The polar bear would come at you a little bit closer. This is supposed to animate, but I couldn't figure out how to do it. And the polar bear at the very end will blow, basically breathe on the screen, and then the entire screen goes white. Again, we got a lot of push for that. This was my favorite part, which probably talks about how simple I am in all of this. But the idea is that you could track your polar bear and you could see what she was doing. This was Aurora, and she was one of our polar bears, and you could track her at any given time. And then cool little tidbits of information would come out, talking about the fact that they can run up to 16 miles an hour, or how much ground they cover in a year, how much they need to eat, et cetera, et cetera. And it was really interesting, and I certainly learned a lot about it. The other part I think that you probably have not heard anything about was Coca-Cola's can turning white. Coke has never had a white can. In 125 years, we never had a white can. And we thought this would be an opportunity to really bring attention to this. So it was a two-phase process. It was introducing the Arctic home through the white can, and then switch that over to the red can, where you brought attention to the bears. And you've probably seen the red cans and the white cans. So this was idea, I don't know how well that shows up here, but it was basically a swipe of a red can and then revealing the white can. And if I can read this correctly up here, it says, open up an ice-cold Arctic refuge, join us. And again, we asked people just merely to donate and spread the word. This was another cool thing that we did. We had the screen, we read, it started snowing incredibly, so the whole thing turned white. The can was wiped, and then you could wipe it clear and reveal the new Coca-Cola can. We did mobile animated ads. And then I'm sure none of you guys have heard of iAd, but this was the first time for Coke that we got involved with this, with Apple. And we thought it was really cool, and building the little ad into the apps and be able to run it. And it gave us an opportunity to showcase the entire Arctic Home website, but do it basically as a microsite with an iAd. And in this case, for example, you could go and you could learn more about the bears. You could check out the environment in which they lived. You could, you know, push these little buttons to get interesting facts. You could see the video that you guys just saw. And we had this 3D landscape that we built that, again, was purely almost educational. At any given time, it says what time it was up in the Arctic, what the temperature was, and in this case, even what the wind direction was and what the bears were going through. All entirely made in 3D animation. You could donate directly from the app within the app, if we want to call it that, the ad within the app. All you did, put your number in, submit it, and there you go. You got the instructions, you donated $1, and surprise, surprise, Coke matched it. And part of that idea for us was a learning experience initially, but it ended up being a phenomenal success for us. And I think that we worked very closely with Apple. We were very pleased with how that whole relationship worked out for us. So that's kind of where most of everything that you saw in there, I had nothing to do with, but I'm happy to talk about it anyway. What I had something to do with was to go to Arctic Home with 7-Eleven. I do retail nowadays. And as far as I'm concerned, that's where the game is played. That's where you hit singles, doubles, triples, a home run. And in the honor of my former hometown team, and Moneyball. I got to step it up for the A's, baby. So in honor of Moneyball, here's my man, Billy Beane. We decided that we had to go in to these guys, and we really wanted to do something with 7-Eleven. It's an incredibly important customer to us, and we thought it was critical. The relationship between a brand and a retailer is really kind of symbiotic in a way. We both need each other. See that, Coke? And they want to get people into the store, they want them to buy more, and they want them to buy more often. Oftentimes, they don't really care what they buy. We want them to come in and buy more often, and we want them to buy more Coke, preferably. But we also want them to keep the love of the brand. Coca-Cola is a loved brand. It is a universal brand. It's an accepting brand. It's for everybody. We want to be sure that we stay relevant to all demographics. The tricky thing about Coke is everybody's your target. Except, of course, kids. But we try to make sure that we go as broad as we can. And when you've been doing it for 125 years, it's critically important that you keep recruiting into the franchise, so not everybody who's drinking Coke is, my age and higher. We want to make sure we stay relevant, but we also want to make sure that we quench people's thirst and we provide the little piece of happiness that we can occasionally do. So this worked out pretty well for us. So what we needed to do for 7-Eleven, and this will come as a huge surprise to you all, every retailer wants something just for them. They want something that is exclusively theirs. They want somebody to be able to come in and say, you know what? That's a really cool thing. Where'd you get that? I got it at 7-Eleven, right? They don't want what everybody else has. So we had to do a distinctive campaign for them that we say fell out of the national program. In other words, use the national program as a basis, and that's Arctic Home. We wanted to leverage each other's strengths. The 7-Eleven franchise has 3 distinct and very strong brands. They have 7-Eleven, they have Slurpee, and they have Big Gulp. And all 3 are terrific brands. We have Coca-Cola. We wanted to build credibility together. Coke has been a good corporate citizen for years and years and years. So has 7-Eleven, but we wanted to continue to see if there was something we could do together. And finally, of course, we wanted to drive sales. There's no doubt about that. So the question we went to our agency with was to say, how can a Slurpee, for example, snowball into a national movement for the polar bear? How can we leverage this great brand of Slurpee to do that? Well, what we kind of decided that was going to work for us was to say, why don't we find a way to turn the 7-Eleven stores into almost like a little hub of social activity for this, where they could go and spread the word and they could go and learn about this. And we could get them to just go out with a very simple message. And retail is all about simplicity. But that idea was we asked the target that shops at 7-Eleven to take part in a national snowball building competition to spread awareness for the polar bear and get rewards along the way. And I don't know if any of you guys are familiar, but we have a rewards program called My Coke Rewards. And that was folded into the Arctic Home and the snowball effect that I'm going to talk to you a little bit about. And there was a way for people to earn rewards the more engaged that they got with the program. So there are a lot of you in this room who do a lot of really cool stuff, and you do a lot of really cutting-edge work. We try to do that as well, and we try to be active, and we're trying to, I don't know that you all know what we did for the Super Bowl, which I think was really pushing the limits of what we can and can't do in this space. This was kind of one of the starting points for that for us. And what we liked about it was that this we called it an incentive-based program. It gave young people who otherwise would not have participated in this effort, it gave them a chance to go out there and raise some awareness for the polar bear and for Arctic Home, but without making it cumbersome or making it a big deal. Just buy a Slurpee cup or go to 711.com or go to slurpee.com and participate in this. So the snowball effect reached consumer inside and outside of 7-Eleven stores so they could make a difference wherever they were, and that seemed to have worked. The journey, you saw it on there, but it's pretty simple. You can scan a QR code, you download the app that you had the snowball effect, you start playing it, and then you challenge your friends via Facebook to get that term. I'm sure you've heard it once or twice today, engagement. And then you grow your snowball, and then ultimately you win some prizes. Right? That was the point. And we got these QR codes all over the place. We got them all over 7-Eleven. We put them in store signage, which is not always easy. We got them all on over 4 million Slurpee cups, over 4.5 million Big Gulp cups. We got them in the App Store. We got it at arctichome.com/7-Eleven. And then you could earn points to build this snowball. So the bigger snowball you had, first of all, you did better, but you also could win more. You could earn those points by buying these products or specially marked Coke packs, but you could also do it by, just checking in. Walk into 7-Eleven, check in, and boom, you earn some extra reward points. You could challenge your friends again. You played it over Facebook, you saw that, and again, the more you got, the better you did. And then finally, you could brag. And you could post it on your wall, or you could post it in your stream, and everybody would know how you did. And we kind of noticed a lot of trash talking going back and forth. I played with my colleague, and he smoked me every time, and I never heard the end of it in this game. And then finally, we could use the app that we had to do everything that you saw in the earlier part of the conversation. Everything that was sitting on that website, you could get straight from that app. So we used the game as a gateway for people to play, get engaged, start playing with Arctic Home, and then going in and learning about it. And ultimately, we wanted people to donate. I think we can feel pretty darn good about how we did this. We have never had a program in the history of our relationship with 7-Eleven that was activated to this degree. We activated on Slurpee.com, on the Slurpee Facebook webpage, in every single store with the exception of a dozen or something like this. We did all of this work. We were in store. We took over their fountains, which has the Big Gulp. We took over their Slurpee. And if you think about it, these are what we call mixed environments. They're Pepsi products in there, but not on this one. And so we developed a specific flavor for them. We called it Snowball Blast. It was basically a frozen Sprite, but we gave it a name, and it hadn't existed before. And we got 99% of their stores activated. And you guys I can't give you comparison numbers, but I can tell you there aren't a lot of numbers that are a lot higher than 99%. And this was across the store. It was inside stores. It was outside stores. It was on gas pumps. It was on all of these things that we got this in on it. The reason we got that in was because 7-Eleven felt really good about being a part of this thing. And they should. There was a huge contribution. They did something that was extraordinarily important for the polar bears. It was important for them. It was important for raising awareness of this issue. They had no pushback from their retailers, their individual licensees, and their franchisees said, we don't want this. Now, you should know 7-Eleven is very, very good about getting stuff activated among the franchisees, but nonetheless, it drove a lot of incremental traffic to 7-Eleven. If it weren't for the fact that I feel like sometimes I work for the Pentagon, I could give you these numbers, but there is no way. But we do know that we can show incremental traffic that was pretty significant. We can talk about frequency of purchase. People came in more often, and they bought more. And as I said, unprecedented. 7-Eleven loved it, and clearly so did we. I now pick one retailer, 7-Eleven. We had this program in 120 different retailers, but not to this degree. What made this program with 7-Eleven so successful was because we tailored it to them. It was only at 7-Eleven that you could get this, but we had Arctic Home activation in basically every single major outlet for Coca-Cola, but not to this degree. And the fact is that the snowball effect that I just showed you, the game, we call it the snowball effect, helped snowball what I think is a wonderful idea and a very worthwhile initiative. And I hope that you guys take a look and keep an eye out. I can't believe we're talking about holiday. It's 9 months away, 8 months away, but when this comes around. And again, I really want to thank you so much for inviting me. I'm thrilled to be in San Francisco, have any opportunity to do this, and thank you very, very much. I can take a few, as long as they're easy, if you want me to do that. Okay.
I had two questions that I'm really, well, first you got to talk about economics. So Coke, you got to talk about economics. So Coke could have written a check.
Sure.
And what I want to know is they then matched money.
Yep.
Did they actually raise more money for polar bears? I mean, did they actually, when you took the cost of what they spent versus the money they raised, was it a positive return on investment, or should we all have saved the aggravation? They just should have written a check for the polar bears.
I'm going to be perfectly blunt. I have absolutely no idea.
So how do you know if you're successful? What's
well,
your
the reason I'm telling you that question is because, as I think I answered a little bit, I set up prior to this, I didn't run the Arctic Home program. So if those are specific questions about that part, you would need to talk to the people who ran the Arctic Home program. I ran the program at 7-Eleven. So I don't have access to that information.
My other question
I'd love to give it to you, but I don't.
Okay. My other question was, that first spot you showed with the polar bears was incredibly emotionally effective. I guess my question is, are we ever going to see that kind of emotional connection be able to be created from digital platforms? Have you seen something in your extensive agency experience, or where you are now, where you can get that kind of emotion over a digital platform?
Well, I think that's a good question. I think I think it's going to be hard to generate that kind of emotion around, a 140-character tweet, perhaps, or if you have somebody posting something on their Facebook page. But I believe as technology starts getting better and we see the effect of, just the Coney, is that how you pronounce the thing? That was a very emotional thing that never ran on television. It was video. I still believe that audio, video, and motion will be able to do that. If you would say to Hal Riney, could you write a very emotional 2-minute spot, if we want to call it, that's going to run on YouTube? Of course he could. I think that the power of the television medium, if we want to call it that, it's just going to transfer to another platform. But I mean, I sat yesterday on the plane next to a guy who's sitting watching all his movies on iPads, and he was I think he was even streaming it from the Wi-Fi on the plane. So I don't see why you couldn't do that. And I think that there's also a way. I actually think some of those little thumbprint things started stirring a little bit of that, and I think that's just going to keep advancing.
Great presentation. I wondered if you could talk a little bit about the QR implementation. We have a panel coming up this afternoon talking about QR codes, and I wondered if you could share a little bit more about, what did you learn? Was it can you share
that's
any
a
sort
question
of
I don't
stats?
want.
What's that?
I think, I guess I'll give you my personal opinion. I wish somebody would come up with something that wasn't so damn ugly. I mean, I hate putting that thing on stuff. And I understand that, we got to do it. But, I've been doing this for, I'm probably more old school. But, I mean, could you see, Bernbach putting something like that on an ad or on a cup? I mean, I think it's terrible. But I think that it does a great job. I mean, for us, the thing that we noticed that I think worked really well was that it allowed to eliminate all those other steps. So you take away, because I mean, how many times haven't you heard this thing? Well, let's make it a really memorable URL. Well, tell us that. I mean, I don't remember any URLs unless it's the brand, right? So to me, I think that there's a way to shorten that, and we learned that through this process. I think the other thing that we learned was if you're going to use the QR code to download something, make that download really small. And that was probably a lesson. So the file size to be really small. But we had, I mean, I think that across the board, I'm not sure that we had extraordinarily high expectations, which is always a good place to start. But with that, I think that we far exceeded what we hoped that we were going to do. But I don't think that we've cracked the best, at least visual implementation of the QR code. All right. Thank you again. Really, really appreciate it.
That was great.